share our studio view for you. The bird's eye view of where war flies overhead. Last night, Sean, I just happened to look at the air raid map at 9 o'clock-ish, whatever time, and it was just a little bit of activity in the east, like there always is, around Kharkiv, down in the south, Nikopol, etc. And I just knew. I said it's just too quiet. So, hold on, I'm gonna move the mics around here because people said they had difficulty with these. All good? Audio's good?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Can hear.
So, and I just had this instinct, like at any moment, that map was not telling the truth, and within less than 60 seconds of that thought, boom! Yeah, off it goes the air raids, and I immediately, because I had been watching just seconds before that there was nothing going on with the air raids, ballistic. Sure enough, only Kyiv was lit at the beginning, then ballistics, and they shot 6 Iskanders and 2 Zircons at us. They actually intercepted them here. They hit a God, what was the location they hit today? It was a green building, Darnitsy. The name of even though our region is Darnitsy, the name of the building was also Darnitsy. It was a clinic or something. Anyway, no injuries, but yeah. So on one side, so I have the river to the west of us, as you know, and a lot of times the battles happen to keep the missiles from going into the even more populated areas on the west side. They want to stop all of them, of course. So I go to counterflank the view on the opposite side of the building, and sure enough, there was a hell of an air battle going to the east of us over all my neighbors, like literally over my neighbors. And that's why I think air defense is so important to talk about, Sean. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so the thing that's left with my mind is like,
it's we need the permissions to build the air defense and the Patriots and the PAC-3s here in Ukraine. It would solve a lot of problems, to be fair.
the question is how close to me? Above.
Yeah, I'm not so unfortunate. I'm quite troubling. I mean, I don't know, not similar, but I'm not high up, 12 stories, but yeah, we live in a valley, top of the valley, so they use the valley as a shield and fly out the cruise missiles and drones through that valley. So it's like they're pretty close. I know what it feels like. They skim the rooftops. It's quite scary when you're with your family and you don't know. You just like as it flies over the top, and then you just think, that's just too close.
Well, what I see often is the air defense on our ends goes off trying to intercept before it ever gets to city level. And then there's that waiting time. Some of our viewers have heard it whenever I've had to be live with it. I go to audio only, turn the camera off, and just kind of do a call play of what I can hear. And that air defense, including the one that was to the east of me, when it went off, there's a range of times between what you may hear, including you may not hear it locally. It may intercept, 12, 13 kilometers out. The range of that intercept is not necessarily within 1 or 2 clicks. And but like last night, sometimes it's nearly immediate. And one of my neighbors who knows me says, he says, I notice your Twitch reaction is getting even faster. You should go work with one of our air defense team. It's like, I got a Twitch that they're about to fire some shit. So
yeah. The spidey sense gets a bit of a tingle, doesn't it?
Right. It's not gonna be now. Not gonna be now. But it does bring up something I mentioned the other day about the one just a few days ago that hit the warehouse since we last talked on a week ago. Is I don't understand the strategy, and you and I talk a lot about the difference between tactics and strategy. And the theme of this week we're going to shift to is about logistics, really on both sides, of course. But as part of that strategy, the reason why I think people should think about what is the strategy the Russians looking for. Like we know the strategy during the winter when they were trying to knock out the electrical grid so we'd freeze to death. So it would ruin the water system. So we would be very uncomfortable and pitch a fit to the government and suddenly want to be Russian. Not gonna happen. But anyway, uh, we're gonna capitulate over all that. No, we're not.
No.
But eventually, one of the other options when they launched just 6 rockets, and that's mostly it. They did it again last night, but it's not like the nights where there's enough damage being done. You could say that there could be a strategy. What do you think?
It's difficult at the moment. We're sort of guessing. The silence is what is really sort of standing out to me.
Silence is a weapon.
I did an interview with the Times. It's now like 130,000 views, I think, and I was talking to her, Kate, about um, the mixed messages coming from the senior leadership. But let's start with there because it all starts with that, and not to mention the silence. I mean, there's just nothing about the Southern Corridor, the problems with Crimea, the fuel shortages. I mean, he's only just saying stuff now, which is not really going into depth. He's still talking, Lavrov's still talking about, he's dreaming about Nazis still and saving the Russian speakers. I mean, this hasn't moved on in their eyes since 2022. I mean, they're living in cloud cuckoo land, and I mean, for all the problems Ukraine's had, essentially Russia's got a huge amount of problems at the moment. Yet they're not saying anything. It's still dependent on who you speak to or see or follow in the Russian leadership. If it's Lavrov, he's still stuck in his narrative bunker, talking about Nazis in his sleep and saving the Russian speakers. You got Medvedev, who's really sort of, depending on whether he's had his bottle of vodka or not, is talking about Armageddon. Kirill Dmitriev, who runs the monetary fund in Russia, is doing the same thing, interfering with British politics. And you've got Peskov, who's trying to downplay Ukrainian innovations, which we've seen the Moscow lid flip, and it's going on now with strategic targets inside Russia and navigating what's meant to be their defensive layer, the most concentrated defense layer in the whole of Russia. So, it's deeply embarrassing. And, Putin's on today talking about Nazis and fulfilling the SMO. There's 1.4 million casualties, I believe, now. And, fuel problems in the gas station of the world. And Crimea looks like it's under siege. And, the 5 years in since the full-scale invasion, 12 years since they started this little sort of shindig, they still can't even take Donetsk Oblast. Yet we're still, we're meant to be holding Ukraine with farmers, conscripts, forced soldiers. Yet we're still holding them, and we're making progress. We're not. With still active defense. So what has Russia got to escalate? It's very little wiggle room, which is what I keep telling everybody is what should scare people. The next step is either nuclear, tactical, conventional warheads, nuclear, or just much of the same. But we haven't had that much of the same since the Moscow lid flip, which is kind of strange, like you've pointed out. I think you had 6 what did you have yesterday? 6 Iskanders,
6 and 2
Zircons. 2 Zircons.
6, yeah.
I mean, and 100 out of 142 drones, 125 drones were taken out. So, it's slightly odd that we haven't seen this retaliation. Lukashenko's been in. We could talk about his points in depth as we go along, but I think Lukashenko's just been in 2 days in Russia because Zelensky's given him an ultimatum, and there's no reports about that either. It seems like they're stuck. They're looking for something. They don't know where they're going. They haven't got an idea. All the Russian senior leadership seems to be saying their own thing, what Putin might want them to say. There doesn't seem to be that singular message now that we saw in 2022, where it was either the saving the Russian speakers, the Nazis, mosquito biolabs, NATO expansion. It was always that set narrative. And I think that's just being undone. The seams are splitting in the narrative, and I don't know what their strategy is. I think they're lost. I think they're searching for one. They don't know where they're going. They've lost Starlink. It's clear their SMO will not. They won't achieve any of their goals for their SMO because of the state of the war, the state of the innovation of drones, and the fact that it's a different war than they even expected. So I don't think they're going to achieve any of their goals. They've not achieved any of them already. So, why aren't people in Russia asking, well, what's our goals now? Instead, we've got, housewives, mums with big lips who are just complaining about there's no fuel. To be honest, that's all I'm seeing is these big, huge, humongous lips in Russia just complaining about the fact there's no fuel. So, yeah, I mean, I have no doubt they're, to get to your point, I have no doubt they're trying to hit military targets, but they don't really give a shit if they hit a monastery or a church or a hospital or civilians.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this for a while, since 2023 in particular, because for people who have not paid attention to how the war evolved, if you will, and when I say the war, I mean the full-scale invasion from 2022 till now. The hybrid war of 2014 until 2022 is an entire different conversation. And actually, for another episode, Sean, I have some plans for you and I to talk about that. Um, I have a lot of good research I've done to really pick that apart for an average American or someone who's never paid attention to suddenly go, oh, that's what hybrid warfare is. Yeah. So right. So that way we know who we were fighting in the first 8 years.
That's a good point to bring out, actually. We don't really talk about that enough. Asymmetric and hybrid warfare and stuff.
To really lock down what happened in the first 8 years will change how people think of the next 4 plus. So, but in the case of the last 4 years, 4+ years, there are campaign eras in which, like the Sorovikin, air bombardment from October 10th, 2022 until January 1st, really 2023. Then it laid off until March 2023, again till May. Then there was there was like specific spans I have an entire notebook of. And at no time did I think they weren't trying to find military targets. When they hit like the Ocean down the street from my old apartment, which is, for those who don't, it's like a big Walmart, or like Fozzie in Odessa when they blew that up when I was on the way out, August 13th, 2023, on the way out. Same thing. They see a big complex that's anything that can hold anything. They're going to feel justified in hitting it.
Yeah.
And it's actually to be somewhat serious about what, like, the tongue-in-cheek way we live around here, and you'll laugh at this because you'll get to meet my buddy, but one of my film buddies, we were going through Epicenter looking for, like, pins and screws and stuff to assemble, and stuff that you would go to like Home Depot in America and just pick up, like, average stuff. The point would have been in the video to say, you'd be amazed what ingenuity does by just being able to go to your local hardware store. My first instinct was, you are not putting that fucking brand inside of a video fucking anywhere, because in every one of those locations is a target. And within 1 week, an epicenter was hit in Kharkiv region. And then within 2 weeks, another epicenter, another location was hit. And I'm like, that's without us even uttering the phrase epicenter, putting it out there, because again, it's not a military target. It's a normal hardware place like our Home Depot. Buying screws at a Home Depot does not make it a legitimate military target. But that is not what Russia thinks when they see warehouse complexes.
No, they don't. They've hit the Novopochta here, Novopochta 1. They hit Novopochta 1. They're now on a drive. The drive to hit Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. They're trying to hit the petrol stations and diesel stations, the gas stations. Those Americans watching. I'll try and talk American where I can. As my wife says, I don't understand your English, she says. And I said, I speak English. There's no such thing as bad English. No, there's no such thing as American English. There's just bad English. And now, like, oh, you can't say that. It's like, no. But
I will totally forget this serious. We're in the middle of serious discussion, but I got to clue everyone in on one of the funniest fucking things that made me about snort out my nose in the middle of a joke. there's a trend with a Scottish girl who's always using an American accent. It's one of her skills. So now they're literally going, "You're not really Scottish." So she gets to play it.
Scotland.
Yeah, she gets to play it back and forth. So there's another girl that said, "Fake Ukrainian, you finally busted me. You're right. I'm really a fake Ukrainian." And then she threw this up there, and she switched it in rapid fire Ukrainian. Oh, like it was so funny the way she switched it to
That's
like it
my
was
wife. That's Larissa's favorite drink.
immediate giveaway. Well, that's the point.
Yeah,
Immediate giveaway was the moment this brand, Jabruk, comes into the frame,
Jabruk. Yeah,
she switches so Ukrainian, it just gives it away. And I was literally taking a swig as I was going like, look, it's so true. This is so Ukrainian.
yeah. Larissa loves that. She's got it here now. I can go in the kitchen and get a either kvass or a bottle of that, and that's coming out. So
Yeah.
that's very Ukrainian.
Little instant culture for our friends. You never know what you get by authentic people here who suddenly will tell you that. Whereas Fanta is the Coke of the Nazis. Well, back 100 years ago, 80 years ago, when they couldn't do business, out came Fanta. It was a way to keep doing business while
Yeah.
evading sanctions, and now it's one of the most popular drinks in all of Ukraine, but not nearly as popular as Zhubruk.
No.
Now, why is Zhubruk also important right now? The next time you go to ask Larissa about this, ask her about the new labels and see if she has an opinion, because they just went to very generic labels and every Ukrainian, she'll say, the fuck happened to Zhubruk?
Yeah.
All right.
There's staples. We got to get back to the task in hand here. But that's culturally that's our cultural segment done for the
Cultural
episode.
segment is finished. We'll be on in 3 hours.
Cultural
with other
segment
stuff.
is finished.
Now,
No, they are hitting diesel and petrol stations. Their terrorism has gone up, no doubt. They're hitting tram stops. They're hitting passenger trains. Their terrorism gone up. It's quiet for me at the moment, but generally I've been watching everywhere else getting hit.
Sumi and
But
Kherson, not and Kharkiv, non-stop share.
yeah, so I mean, it's literally business as usual for the Russians. They're just waiting for this big hit
Mm-hmm.
that we were promised last week. That's not coming, but I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think the only way Russia can escalate now is if they bring Lukashenko and Belarus into it, and I think he's quite reluctant to be a part of that. But I don't think, he is. Belarus is essentially an oblast of Russia, so I don't know where that's going to go. We're just waiting for that now. I think
Right.
Zelensky was right to give him an ultimatum. It's national security.
Mm-hmm.
As I said to the Times, you can't be half pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You've got Russian military on your country. They pretty much run your country, And if you've
Mm-hmm.
got equipment, they're helping them direct drones into Ukraine, then you essentially, apart from the fact, if we take out the fact that they were used as a platform to launch the invasion in the fucking first place, where Russia committed the most awful atrocities in Kyiv, Irpin and Bucha, then, they're a part of the war, essentially. So he's not going to get out of it that easy. And I'm sure his visit to Moscow was Putin telling him exactly that. You're not going to get out of it that easy.
Well, I think that there's a couple things that brings up, which is that one, um, my Street Fighter instincts always know which fighter I don't really want to get into it with. Like I can tell there's someone who fights a lot. I don't mean someone who looks beat up a lot. I mean someone
Yeah.
who's got that look like, I think he's fresh. I think he just got through practicing, I think I want to handle it differently would be the better way to say it, right? And that is really where Ukraine is right now. There's two parts of that. One, Belarus would be wise to basically stay the fuck out of this fight. No
Yeah.
one in that command is seasoned and now ready for a fight that's actually above near peer at this point for Belarus. They're not tested at all. So there's that. Now they can certainly run logistical lines like we would like to have the Europeans do. But I think that again, just in the psychology of it, if I were in that camp, and I mean the political camp behind a military voice, it'd be like, do we want a bloody nose? Do we kind of want to be a bunch of just like cowardly people under the Kremlin? I think they'll be better off being cowardly people under the Kremlin and take the heat. But this last week also it was discussed that European military are more welcome to come here and try to learn from within a sphere that is now the only time they can possibly learn things. That now is the only way and time in which the most seasoned troops can get a rotation at a line to try to learn something that they take home. And it was part of the way, it's sort of an expansion of the appeal of the International Legion in a way, but they didn't say Legion necessarily. They were talking about the way in which foreign fighters, and I mean in the sense of existing active military for the Germans, for the Swedes, for whoever, could come here and for a segment of time train in what is needed to know right now.
No, absolutely. I'd I'd
Yeah.
I'd certainly agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, it pretty much is like that at the moment. I mean, when you've got Peskov saying things like trying to downplay Ukrainian innovation, saying that the country is demilitarized because it's just using Western weapons, that's an absolute lie. I went to 5 Point last week. I've been to see Coming Back Alive. They bring in and support the defense industry in Ukraine. They're native,
Hmm.
they're naturally Ukrainian companies that have grown since the full scale invasion, who bring in more than most countries, billions they bring in to support Ukrainian the defense industry. So, and 5 Point, for those that don't know, is an organic company that's grown with since the start of the war, that had sort of 18 employees to start with, and now 6,000 employees. That pretty much everybody's heard of the Flamingo. Um,
Right,
so,
right.
so
Russ's heard about it a lot in the last few weeks, brother.
it has. Well, Peskov hasn't. So, his statements have said completely the opposite. So, do I think he's underestimated Ukraine? No, I think he's lying through his back teeth to the Russian people. I think there's a real problem there, and I think if you think that Ukraine's been demilitarized just using Western weapons, and then that's solely to a domestic audience that is an outright lie. And I having been the other side, I don't think Russians are that kind of stupid. I mean, your housewives with your big lips and your Chanel bags who can't get fuel are one thing, but generally, when I was in a Russian prison, they weren't daft. They knew that the news was propaganda. They knew the Ukrainians were getting closer to the prison I was in, and they weren't stupid. So I suspect there's a lot of that with what you're seeing on the social media now, with a lot of
Hmm.
people. We had that Russian soldier in a week who that video that went viral. Lunin, is it?
The one last week on Rebar.
Yeah, he's gone viral. He's been arrested
The new
now.
Prigozhin. Oh, did he get
And
arrested?
that was backed up by, I think, at least the platoon size of Russians who went online shortly after saying, yeah, you need to get in. This is really bad here,
Hmm.
And what's he done? He's just arrested him. So, and ransacked his wife's house, and they're quick because Prigozhin, Putin's pretty much had his fingers burnt with Prigozhin. He knows how quick this can spread. So, they were quite quick to arrest him and go through his house. And apparently they stole his nunchucks as well. So, according to his wife,
Now that's the problem. You got to
that's
leave the nunchucks alone.
that's just going. That wouldn't happen in America, to be fair.
No, I'll shoot you. You mess with my nunchucks, I'll fucking shoot you.
Absolutely. So that's where, I mean, he knows, and he's just done a broadcast where he's still pushing his SMO objectives, Putin,
Right.
and total denial that anything's going on. And
Well, you saw the news that broke in the last couple of days. Really, not broke, but I mean it kind of leaked to the top of the septic tank. The Anchorage understandings are no longer in effect. That the Trump administration feels a
yeah,
little
I mean,
jilted.
I think Lukashenko's visit to Russia was largely to do with the fact that he's getting quite pally with Trump. They've just released a lot of prisoners, political prisoners, and they got sanctions relief for that. And I think that's unsettled unsettled Putin somewhat. He's not sure where his friends lie, and I'm completely speculating when I say this. But the article I wrote in the week,
One's in the ground. Sergei Ivanov is dead. He worm food.
I always put my my Russian generals when they die. I put them on my Instagram to the backing track of Queen, and another one bites the dust. And I got pulled for it from Instagram. You know, it's
Why?
like they pulled me for it, so I can't do that anymore. So
they don't pull any of the people that wish death upon me and Ukrainians.
dude, I get called Nazi and I get called all the names under the sun. I put something like a double entendre where I might say something along the lines of, well, he could be lynched for saying that, and I'll get 100 reports for it. He's telling me he's going to be lynched, and I'm like, oh, that's not exactly what I put. I said, I'm surprised he hasn't been lynched for saying that.
I said it takes a coalition to defeat Russia like it did with Germany and Japan, and I get yelled at every day that I don't know how history works, which is exactly how Nazi Germany and Japan were defeated, was a coalition. But the attacks, the stuff that's really gross beyond pale, and again, it's not about whether it's at me, it's just that it gets said. Instagram literally does not apply to 90% of what I report. That is, you Ukraine Nazis deserve to die. You deserve what happened.
Yeah.
This was after the attack on the 13th, 14th of May, resulting in 24 people killed. This is what I'm commenting on. Literally with air raid over the speaker in my ears as I'm speaking, and the wish for more of it, or saying it's retaliation for something that would come a week later, all that stuff. None of that gets flagged by the platform when you report it.
No, it just says not broken any rules. Like, just call me a Nazi and a pedophile.
Yeah, if I say anything in return, especially if it's on the caliber of what I think at the moment, I'll be the one that gets flagged for saying something. And we do know some accounts that have been pulled for responding neutrally.
And the Russians are watching your account.
Oh, they are now.
If you say something like, well, I said something along the lines of Peskov said something. I said, well, he's lying. I'm surprised he hasn't been lynched by the Russians yet. And that got a barrage of complaints. So I had to pull that quote from X, which is absolutely bloody ridiculous. When I get called a Nazi to people, I'll report it. And it's like they haven't broken any rules. And I'm like, this is just phenomenal, X. Anyway, I was going back. Speculation. I'm speculating here, but I've got reason, and I want you to hear me out on this.
Of course.
Speculation. We follow this war every single day, and silence for me is a big sign that there's some massive problems in the Kremlin. It is for you. It is for me. Anybody who lives here next to Russia for 10 years. One of the biggest things is the deflection. So he doesn't want to talk about the Southern Corridor of Crimea. So what does he do? He's going to hit cultural sites. He's going to hit UNESCO sites. He's going to hit monasteries, hospitals, fly drones into NATO countries, anywhere to take the deflect where the problem actually is. So that's one thing. And I try and raise people's awareness of that when that happens. But the other thing is the detached, more than normal rhetoric from senior officials in the Kremlin. Yes, they throw it about everywhere. That's their MO. However, this is more. This is like more even nuts for Russia, where you've got one level, it's Putin wanted to talk peace, and then you've got another level, which is Medvedev, who wants total Armageddon. So that at the moment is so wide and being spouted out by different members of the Kremlin leadership that's slightly odd that it's that vast, that different. Because how can you have some sort of clarity on where you're going if one of your security, national security, Russian national security in Medvedev is calling for Armageddon, and then you've got Izhikov, who's pretty much wanting peace. So what we have now is Lukashenko coming in, and nobody making the decision. They've just shut up shop in the Kremlin. They're not talking about anything. They're not talking about the corridor. They're not talking about what's that noise? Is that you?
That's a dog or something.
Hold on. I think I've got a cross white. It's probably me here. That's it. It's me. So
okay.
what we've got is we've got a literal shutting up a shop in the Crimea, and that speaks volumes at the moment. That really speaks volumes, because it seems like they're searching for a plan. They've already denied the offer that Zelensky's given them, wrote to him in the open letter saying, he wanted humanitarian, a total prisoner swap, a ceasefire. He's already poo-pooed that. So where does Russia go? I mean, it's not achieved any of its goals in 12 years. What happens next? Where can they escalate to now? They can't. I mean, it's like the pressure's on Putin more than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
So another thing real quick in there is that it's been a fortune that the European community, and I said they were doing this a couple years ago. So remember when the Sullivan's escalating campaign garbage that was all over everywhere. One of the things I said way back then is that you don't understand what a collective alliance really is like until you get in this situation where it's not the alliance being attacked, it's just outside the alliance, right? And the tough talkers, and it could be any number of 4, 5, 6, 10, who cares? If it's not the overwhelming plurality, then you're going to have plenty of countries who say, look, I'll give arsenal and we'll give everything else we can, but man, we can't get in a war. So you promise we won't get in a war, right? Oh, of course. Okay. Just try to send supplies. Okay. And try to get your act together. Oh, okay. And that happened with a lot of countries. I can prove that with a lot of countries that didn't have their act together. They were enjoying healthcare. As people go on. And cafe and healthcare is a good thing. And so everyone made it easy. Only the United States is doing this, that, and the other. Only the United States can be the super powerful decision maker. Now, when Trump came in, the reason why I know that there was some legitimacy to my original premise, which is that it's the collective that makes the phone call, causing some delays, not simply Jake Sullivan, who would make it like one person controls all these gears, which makes no sense, is that when Trump got in office, we saw the effect of the same system when Trump would go do something absolutely outlandish to harm Ukraine, and then get the phone calls from Starmer, from Merz, from Macron, going, Donald, man, what are you doing, man?
What are you doing?
Like, what are you doing? Well, I was on the phone with Vladimir, and like he was being nice. I know, but Donald, or King Charles III, Donald, you need a parade. Yeah, we'll get you a parade, Donald. And they all understood to do an influence operation on him, right? They mastered doing an influence operation. Well, the reason why I break it up is that this week there is confirmation that he had planned on ceding Donbass to Russia until Macron and others got on the phone with him and said, "No fucking way, dude."
Yeah. Well, my feelings about JD Vance saying that it's just a few kilometers of haggling, and I was like, what? It's like 1,600 kilometer front line. It's like 10 million refugees for
I just know if I had him in a room, I'd yell at him hard enough that mascara would find me drip.
He is the exact reason why you don't put a Lance Corporal as VP. He's a fucking mole, mate. He's an idiot.
The typhoid Mary of foreign policy.
He's going to be worse than Trump. He's an out and out. He doesn't give a shit. He has
no center core.
Commercial interests are in Russia. He doesn't give a shit about Ukraine.
Yeah,
he said that pretty much.
In particular, he said on that platform, and I have the transcript where I wrote up an entire Substack about him, the shapeshifter, and a big part of the backbone for the shapeshifter article I wrote on this platform called Substack. Free for all subscribers, by the way, for all people who are not subscribers. It's free for everybody because that's what we do on this platform. I took the entire, it's true. I took the
that's
entire
sarcasm.
spaces.
Is that sarcasm there? Is it?
No, seriously. I took the entire Spaces transcript with him, Elon Musk, Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, Vivek Ramaswamy, and David Sachs, literally trying to destroy aid for Ukraine, and his Senate transcript from just a few days before in March 2024, and just digitized the shit out of all of that, broke it down into themes of all, especially his filibuster on the Senate floor was way too in depth for a fucking hillbilly. Why does a hillbilly have this much investment in wanting to destroy funding for Ukraine? Why that? Because when someone gets an odd obsession with trying to stop something, you kind of want to know, where does it come from?
Where does that come from? Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you have that much energy for that from hillbilly land? You know? And he really does have a weird obsession with bragging of defunding the defense of Ukraine, bragging
Well,
of pulling money out of American taxpayers' pockets, or workers' pockets in Arkansas, Florida, Texas, California, where millions and millions of dollars pour into those economies, local small town economies, to build parts for everything that saves lives here, that refurbishes the United States military. And he's like, yeah, one of my best accomplishments ever was defeating that.
yeah.
You got to
Might have
enjoy
some
that.
beautiful. Just
You got to enjoy that thing. Go ahead. I'm listening.
yeah, absolutely. No, I mean I totally agree with you. It's commercial interests with Rumble. They platform Russian state television. It's like he's so innocuously involved with his commercial revenues with Russia that there's no. That's where his decision lies. I mean, it's like I'm surprised people don't even talk about that more. Him, Ramaswamy, they were all founders of Rumble, and they platform Russian state television. So you can see where the commercial revenue is and why he would like Russia over Ukraine. So I mean that it's all to do with the money at the end of the day, and he doesn't get that in Ukraine. So yeah, I mean JD Vance is going to be a worse problem, to be fair. But I mean, how they're all reacted to things like Crimea, now in a state of emergency. You can see. This only last week we had Tommy Robinson and the Tate brothers and Candice Owens in sort of spouting Russian. None of them could speak a lick of Russian. None of them know the culture. They were all in St. Petersburg at the Economic Forum there, and so it was only last week now, and then this week we've got Crimea in a state of emergency. This is Larissa's home. This is families are now excited about the possibility of maybe going back home. And Russia's they're evacuating the peninsula. They're now trying to get rid of properties they owned at rock bottom price, trying to get something for it. There's fuel queues there. Right. I wrote an article for it. I'm quite ironically, I broke down analysis on Crimea. Within 2 hours later, they sort of announced a state of emergency, which was quite interesting. Not luck, that was prediction. You could see it happening. So again, we go back to, Russia projecting this image of strength, while essentially, Crimea's under siege and their guys' southern access is on the verge of collapse. So, I mean, it's a real, where I think we're seeing a Russia really stuck. We're seeing a Putin really stuck. Silence, information from their senior leadership just going all over the place. This tells you Putin's retracted, not talking to his senior leadership. Lavrov's stuck in a narrative bunker back in 2022, still trying to push Nazis and saving the Russian speakers, despite them, flattening predominantly Russian-speaking cities and killing many of them. So even I sit here and I live here and I go, people say to me, where do you think it's going to go, Sean? I'm like, I fucking ain't got a clue. I think it's going to escalate. I think it's going to get worse. And they said, explain that, Sean. Why is it going to get worse? And I keep saying, because Ukraine's making more innovations and reaching further into Russia. Russia doesn't have an answer. It can't escalate. It can't go anywhere. It can't do anything. Oh, look, what's it going to do? Mobilize more men? That's not going to solve these problems. He's just going to have
I wrote
another
the article
million
this
guys
week.
die.
I put the article out this week. Moscow is burning. To show, as you know, I like to use a lot of the Telegram announcements over the last 4 years. I have all the archives of many different units in the armed forces.
Hi, Chris.
The enemy, MilSec responses. So we have what our guys plus the news reports about strikes in Russian locations, including Russian locations in occupied territory. And then we have the MilSec response from the Russian side saying, why aren't you protecting our resources? What's up with you, Bled? So I kind of laughed here earlier this week with the use of the phrase 40 days influence operation, because I thought they meant like, an influence operation of ambassadors and think tanks. Kind of a funny spin on the word was saying we're going to bomb the shit out of you for a week. And we're going to reach further and further in. So the other night when we had those handful of missiles, just 3 or 4 nights ago, that hit the warehouse behind us, the outgoing drones were over 300.
Yeah.
So that's the influence operation that Russia really doesn't want to be part of, because they have had to move those lines. And in that MilSec response, in especially Rebar, which I'm dissecting the entire archive again, is a bunch of bitching about why are we always moving our air defenses, and why are we placing air defense around specific locations that are more personal to powers that be, instead of like good for the people, good for the strategy. So there's a lot of ways that you're going to see this corruption. And last thought, that it was kind of back a few minutes ago, but I think it ties it all in, is that Ukraine is on the uptick against corruption in more ways than simply its own internal battles. It's need in the European community, meaning that the Europeans and America and Canada and everyone else and the Middle East need Ukrainian knowledge and experience. It means that they have a better batch of, for a moment, I must say allies in the loose sense of the word. Remember, allies is a technical term. These are not allies until there's an alliance on paper, but there's close alliance. What does Russia have? Russia has built a world of corruption. It feeds corruption to maintain its world. So the only world it can draw from to get any more resources is the corrupt world. So when it corrupts countries in, this basically in Africa or like Latin America, they maintain a footprint across the world, yes, but they don't necessarily have a yield for resources the way Ukraine is able to have right now by being the better of the two countries. You catch my point?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's.
And I think that's what fries Russia's future.
I think even more so. I mean, I personally don't believe. Going on what you're saying there, Trump this week, there's lots of reports sort of saying that he's changed his tune. How many times have we heard that? I just sit here and I just go, I don't.
Well, they instituted some sanctions that they had let, kind of not be all important. And I think part of it is economics. I think that there's no future in the economics for America to try to invest in Russian MilSec. It's not a thing.
No.
Investing in Ukrainian MilSec, that's a thing.
That's the thing. Right? And I'll tell you why, because I went there last week. A Tomahawk missile is going to be redundant. It's going to be 1/3 of the price for a Flamingo. It's going to fly further, carry a full payload. I mean, you can see where there's Russian, the American arms industry is looking at going, holy shit.
That's correct.
Where have you gone? What have you seen? Ah. Oh,
Keep them around at all times.
you have the cards.
They're right
Yeah,
there at the balcony
absolutely.
at all times.
And you can see when Peskov releases a statement,
Oh, and they're
stating
in Ukraine. They're actually in Ukraine.
when Peskov releases a statement saying that Ukraine's been demilitarized, we're just using Western weapons. When you've got Europe and NATO now looking to Ukraine because they're not geared up for just even modern warfare.
Mhm.
What you've got is, uh, Ukraine is rewriting warfare. This is a country that's taken out the Black Sea Fleet and doesn't have a conventional navy. This is a country that's just doesn't need to go into Crimea because it's just going to do what it does. Just bombard Russia with drones until they just capitulate. They don't need sending. They don't have the
This
massive
reminds me
amount of troops to drive into Crimea.
this
So they're just going to
the
keep
end of
trying it.
this reminds me of the end of the Kyiv masters, as we would talk about in the martial arts world. All these people who were like the leaders of the martial art world until MMA came out and basically threw people in an actual ring to fight with each other. And all of a sudden, all these arts, it became stupid. They were performative. They were not hard tested. They were wastes. Entire what we call belt factories just disintegrated because once you put them in a real ring where they had to, to go at it, this was really started in the 90s, but it changed things. It basically said, so and so's an Aikido master. Sure, I'll tell you what, put him in the ring over here with my friend Thomas. Thomas is a blue belt MMA guy. Yeah, blue belt MMA guy just completely decimated it. Some third or fourth dan Aikido guy who never got his ass kicked enough. That's the modern military problem we have right now. We have the United States military walked into a fight it started and then had to walk back and go, oh, well, here's some reparations and what else you need fixed around here. So sorry. Not because of the military guys themselves. They're just doing the job. But, the leadership fucked up, from day one. They had no plan, no objective. Just started we're going to march in, we're going to start a war. Maybe we'll put some down, maybe we won't. You can't do that. The hell is that?
And you bought the wrong gear.
You came in with all the wrong gear.
You came in, you're like going to a football match with cricket stuff. It's like I'll explain for those who don't know what cricket is later, but it's not football, okay?
Baseball and Valiant.
So yeah, it's
Baseball
like
and mushrooms and Valiant.
you've got to understand where Ukraine's had to do this the hard way for innovation because of necessity to survive. So it's built all this stuff because it knows where it sits in the world.
Right.
And now is beating. Technically, I mean, a peer-to-peer army for Russia would be China or America, not Ukraine. But look at what Iran's done to America. Look at what Ukraine's doing to Russia. I mean, there's no such thing anymore. It's brought everybody up a level. Drones has brought an innovation has brought everybody.
But I mean, I think that analogy really fits because again, there were these folks that I won't name them, but they were thought of in the martial arts world as the untouchable something, and it was a myth they created for themselves. And then when like a couple of them got challenged, they're like, okay, I'll take the challenge. Next thing you know, they're landing on the ground from a nobody, who literally just didn't care about your stature and your status. It's what I see with the big militaries that are unchecked after seeing what Ukraine just did to Russia. Is to say that if you don't understand, like, this is why I said about like on a street fight level, my first skill is to read the body language of somebody. If I read that body language correctly, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home pretty well. In fact, I'm going to go home just fine. But if I read that body language incorrectly, and that's everything I see in front of me, then and there's so many males that go out and start a fight. You can tell they're not ready to fight, and they get their ass kicked, and they shouldn't do it. Then there's that one man. He was in the gym every day that week, getting the shit knocked out of him. And then you kind of bumped into him over his coffee,
and he loves getting it in the fights.
And he loves getting in the fight. So the next thing you know, you're on the ground, and you find out that's what he's been doing all week. What have you been doing?
Yeah.
That's what it's gonna be like fighting Ukraine.
It is, and I think, I mean, what we got to remember is that my talks last week with the former Prime Minister and going to the fire point was that they were very skeptical. Pessimistic wouldn't be the right word because you don't have a choice to be pessimistic in Ukraine. But certainly they were very apprehensive about the winter coming up. They were already thinking about the winter because the last one was so hard. And, they're already sitting there talking about, they're not happy with the way the Western press is saying they're winning. As a military man, I keep telling people we're not winning. We just got the initiative back. That's not the same as winning.
There's difference between we're not winning and Russia is losing. Like Russia's losing because
we're
Russia
not
should have won a long time ago. And Russia started it. So long as Russia is not actually winning, Russia's losing because it's the aggressor.
Yeah, their winning is to take over Ukraine, and and while Ukraine is here, they can't even take Donetsk or Blast. You could argue that we're winning. However, they still own a good chunk of the country. They can still put money and resources, and if they go into war for it, creates some problems. They're far bigger than Ukraine. We've got our own manning issues, so people are realistic here, and realism plays an important part in how they focus the next part of the war. And that, I think, is why Ukraine is having some success at the moment. The wind is clearly at Ukraine's back. The innovation's there. It's anticipating what Russia's doing. It's hitting the logistics. It's causing problems to the point where Russia's now, you've seen it this week, where every videos of a huge lips housewife complaining she can't get fuel for the car. So it's that's where we sit.
Didn't you see a video? Didn't you see a video of families talking about not being able to see their son before they go to war?
That was, I found that, even though it was Russian, I found that quite powerful. That was Russia's, and I'm not a Russian sympathizer by any means. I'm the first one to really go to town, but that is families. That's guys that essentially the video was wives, girlfriends, families stopped a Russian convoy going out of a base. Where they were going, I can't clarify. I don't particularly know, but it was families of Russians who were saying, look, at least give us some parcels to them. We haven't been able to talk to them. We can't get to see them. And I think these were guys that were sort of not mutinied, but said they weren't going to die on the front lines. They were against the war. So it was quite empowering to see that video, which if we could put it out somewhere, I'd show people. But it showed the fact that families were willing to stop military convoys. And that's a big thing in Russia, because you can do some serious jail time for even criticizing negatively the military there. And we're seeing that now. And even with those laws, people are still putting Ukrainian successes and going to the internet with their VPNs and creating for the. So it's not died. Putin hasn't killed anything off. It's not, stopped them reporting on the war, which I think is driving him nuts. But essentially, it's quite a powerful thing to see, families. And having been there, one of the questions the Times asked me this week was, if a flamingo was yours, where would you stick it? And I just didn't want to answer that question. I was just saying I'd rather have it just peace. And I never asked for this in the first place. I definitely don't feel comfortable about answering that on a live TV program. But certainly, I know where I'd want to.
Bro, that's the difference between the two of us, because I would have given them 5 base locations and said I know exactly where she
goes. That's it. And I've seen that. I don't want this war.
Bear with me. Keep talking. I can hear you. I'm gonna turn on light.
Yeah, I literally don't want this war to keep going. I want a just peace for Ukraine. I want Ukraine to win. But we got to remember, Russia could leave this country and stop this war anytime they want it. Russia could, do that, but they don't.
Right.
So I'm kind of thinking that, which is a good point, sort of towards as we wrap up. I think it's a really good point to raise the fact that I think Russians are actually seeing the extent of this war, that it's, they're not interested in stopping this war because they slaughtered 25,000 predominantly Russian speakers in Mariupol, including women and children. They're not interested in stopping the war because of the carnage and the damage they've caused. We've got more response from Russia by Putin curbing Western apps. Putin throttling the internet.
But that's really when you start getting a change in Easter. Like in America, my theory would be you're not going to get a real change until those who feel cushy have their cushiness removed. Like even here in Ukraine, you and I know what it feels like to have people who are comfy working at their cafe in the grocery store or whatever else, and they're not in the war, and they're hoping it's all okay, but someone else is taking all the sacrifices, someone else is doing all the work, and so even here we can understand that strategy. But in America, there's a layer above my financial level that I know until those people hurt, Donald Trump is safe until those people feel it at a level that's existential, meaning I had to choose between eating or even feeding my kids or whatever else, and like something that's like, a lung transplant, until they feel that level of angst, they're not going to make big changes because they don't feel it. And the same thing in Russia. There's that class that has been buffered. You can see they're the excuse makers. And I brought up Putin's babushka posse, how they were really cute and we don't even do Halloween because Halloween's of the Satan and we do this and they were acting all cool, right? We're the babushka or the babushka and we're so cool. And so that was 2 years ago, right? Go find those videos now from the exact same ladies. They're like, why are we being bombed? I don't understand. What's the bombing for? There's none of that snarkiness is in their messages now.
No, swagger's gone completely.
Yeah, swagger's gone.
And the swagger's gone. It's
and
fighting
so
fires.
That's really what you want to do is two things. Remove the fire from your belly, your enemy's belly. And that's for the fighting side.
That's my point. Putin removed that. He did that. He throttled the Western apps. He got them into, and I think generally most Russians are like, now this is really bad, because Putin's throttled it wasn't nothing to do with NATO. This was nothing to do with Ukraine.
Right.
The biggest first step before the fuel crisis was Putin throttled Western apps. And I think that started the genre. If we're going to go back to history, I think it was all
going to end. Didn't you think it was all going to end when the fat guy changed himself to the front of McDonald's?
I've had a Don Mac.
Actually, I shouldn't have brought that up because you were busy at that time, if I recall.
I had a Don Mac. For those that don't know, was when McDonald's didn't work in Donetsk anymore. They replaced it with not just the McDonald's franchise with a Don Mac. And I had one on a camera with a Don Mac where I was filmed eating it. It was rank. To be fair. But when you're in prison, beggars can't be choosers, and I loved it. It was amazing. It was like the only thing I did other than bread. So it was pretty good to eat that. Thank you, whoever's decision that was to give me some.
So let's give some good news to our friends here. We had some returns this week.
We did.
2 days ago.
Yeah, we had 8 guys from our battalion returned as well this week, which is great. Haven't seen the list yet. I'm meeting myself coming back at the moment, so I haven't actually seen who. But my friends always tell me if any of our guys, anyone I know, has been released, because they go, "Guess what? Baz is back home," and I'm like, "Yeah," but there's still loads in captivity though.
Yeah. So the first one is always mentioned that these are piecemeal releases, including there were some, I think 8 civilians were returned. But in particular,
we're still waiting for Trump's 1,000 for Victory Day that never happened.
Well, that's what they keep saying. This is part of the 1,000 for 1,000, but even the one last year was like significant chunks of people came home. This is like 160, 170. And again, we're thankful for all of them. So let me tell all of our viewers, we have a site that we built. It's a free site that's just designed to help share information. I do need to update this release into the website, heroes-ukraine.org. And at this site, you can send a generic message if you just don't know a particular defender you want to say something to. I tend to find the newest ones that have been coming home and send it to all of those if it's a generic one. If it's one for just this particular release, there are three particular young brothers that I developed posters for at the request of their families, and that would be Serhiy and Stanislav and Dmitro. And my friend Anastasia, whose brother Dmitro just returned, for instance, we almost have like a little bit of a game in the sense on Instagram, as you know, Sean, where we can share a story, add a story. So she will send me a poster of her with her brother's sign, and and it's like add story, and I post it up immediately, becomes my reel. And then if I don't see something from her within a few days, I go to her account and I take one of those and I boost it up onto my reel. And we've been doing this for a long time. And then all of a sudden I see Vindoma, nareszty, he's home. And my first instinct each time, besides flooding with fucking tears and emotions, is to message confirmation that he's home. Yeah. And I just don't have words at that point of like just enjoy. But also they are very aware you guys are out there. That's why those posters mattered. That's why making those for an English speaking audience was a mission a year ago. And I'm going to be very clear going forward. Not always nice about a few things for a few reasons. It's moments like this. There were people who took it very serious, like Daily Fella, a really cool account that took a couple of those posters and put those things in Daily Fella. And then when those guys came home from captivity, one of the first things I did is said, "We didn't forget you. In fact, did you know you were in this like weird newspaper?" They're like, they don't even know what a fella is. They don't know what NAFO is, but they saw their face there that people lobbied for them.
Yeah.
And that's the axis right there. That's the axe line right there that you have to decide where your actions are. And I'm going to be very serious. There were some porters I went to a year ago on Twitter that I said, please, boost this out. They totally graystoned it in favor of their own sticker making or whatever their priorities were. They didn't do it. Others did. And I was able to say that we successfully contributed to this messages. The families really thank you for doing so. The families, the moms, the wives, the sisters, and everyone else. But more importantly, those guys, when they come home, I'm one of the first people they get to text with. It's a strange blessing to be in my little location where I get to just say, hey, like just thinking about you, there's a lot of people. And I become the first English off ramp to someone who just went through 4 years of fucking hell. And they will tell me what happened because the first thing that they'll be told by their sister, their wife, their mom, whoever is, oh, well, Chris was always with us. Chris didn't profit off of us. And same thing with Sean. They know Sean. Um, heroes-ukraine.org is the link. And it is important when these guys come back to see not only that their wives were out there waiting and didn't give up, or their moms, but there was a Western crew of just people who didn't know me because these guys come back, they're just Ukrainian, they're just a guy, they went and served their country and they come home and there's an international group of people who had my face on their Instagram. Wow. And it means a lot to them. So guys and ladies, please send a message. There's a contact form there. And usually they have to be written into Ukrainian, but we take care of that. When there are responses, and there are often responses, it's happened one of two ways. Comes back to me, or often in the email, and you can state so if you want. We just send them the email that you have, and they may write to you directly. And it's a great opportunity to make a difference.
It is. I didn't know what NAFU was when I came out.
I still don't know what it is, and I helped create it.
I got a little character. He doesn't go. I let him out. I told you I don't do it. I still let my little NAFU character out occasionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great crowdsourcing campaign of activity, counter disinformation, support for Ukraine. I actually do have nearly nothing but love for you, NAFO. And I say nearly nothing because even with every good team, you got to have a little bit of got to get it together.
And don't
see, I have my Scottish Football Association jersey on, for instance. The fans, the Tartan Army were great, but my team kind of could have done better.
Don't say to a lady, "Do you want to see my little fella?" Because it
Do
doesn't
you want to
end
see
well.
my little fella?
Yeah, it just doesn't end well. So, unless you're in the game.
It's the wild hedgehog I found yesterday in my front garden.
Oh,
My
look,
little
somebody's put it
fella.
up. There you go. Somebody's put it at heroesukraine.org.
Heroes-ukraine.org, yeah. And again, if you say you can even write and say, Chris, I don't remember which ones you mentioned. Could you send it to all of them? And I'll do that. It's not a problem.
We got 100 people tonight. That's
We
amazing.
do.
That's pretty cool. We've had we get about 2,000 or 3,000 now who
People love it.
download it through the week.
Don't you guys love having authentic, experienced voices who actually live in Ukraine? No offense to people who come here. We're glad you do. Please come. But those of us who live here, we have a different way. Like, we know that Zhybruk means something important to Ukrainians. You know these things.
Yes.
Ask Larissa about the change in the cover on that. Say, Chris brought up that they just changed the cover for Zhybruk.
Yeah, she
Is
won't
that
be
a
happy.
deal?
Yeah.
It's like when they changed the formula for Coca-Cola. People went, "What'd you do this for?"
What'd you do there?
Should say, bro. No shorty.
Have we got anything else we want to talk about?
I think we. How do we have it? Is it pretty good? Now
I
this week,
think we're pretty good.
I'm going to go be meeting. I'm going to the Crimea conference. I will be
Right, let's talk about
reporting
what we're
during the
doing.
week, and I will report into you. I will film as much as I can film of whatever speeches are possible, and build our bridge. Tomorrow, I will be having meetings with Defender Family organizers, the serious ones. This is a pretty good meeting where we're going to talk about more proactively what we can do abroad. And so, Sean was at the event at the museum with the same groups. Also, if you remember in the crowd that night or that afternoon, we were at the museum, Sean, there was a couple of the defenders who didn't speak on the panel, but they were referenced to. So I ran into one of those brothers at the rally last week, and they would love to come film with us. And we will be going. So 1 week from now, I will not be in Kyiv if everything works out. I will be in somewhere that goes boom a lot, and we will still do our program.
I'm not going to a place that's going boom. We're out of the country for a week.
That's right. You're almost.
We've been invited to Portugal to see a group of volunteers who bring over vehicles to Ukraine.
Right.
And they've paid for Loki, me and my wife, to go to Portugal to do a talk at a company there, which is quite a large workforce. And we'll be talking about Ukraine and the importance of supporting Ukraine and why.
Right.
Why we're going over there to talk to them is because it's just another country and we can get to talk to a lot of people. So I'm quite looking forward to that. It was unexpected and the invitation was there. And so me and the wife and Loki are going off with his passport off to Portugal, which would be quite interesting. So we get to go for a few days and a bit of a break. So that'll be interesting. We're literally I'm going back to the UK hopefully soon to do some talks with the military there about operating Ukraine and bits and pieces there, and still writing, still doing the stuff, same as you. And then hopefully when we get back, we'll be doing some more interviews with people like Bear. We're talking about Bear is my commander from Mariupol who was there. We want to talk to him about specific things like the 501st and what happened and what's it like to command a platoon that's encircled inside Mariupol, which would quite interest a lot of people about that. And he's now a Ukrainian strongman, which is like, he's huge. He's literally huge. So, and life after captivity and what he's doing now. So we've got all the footage from when he was in captivity. That'd be good. What else are we doing, Chris? I can't remember. What else are we doing?
Well, actually, I'm going to come back I was going to do it 2 hours from now, but I need 3 hours because I need 1 more hour to plan. I'm going to come up here and do a really good culture thing for Sunday night for our wonderful viewers. That's off topic again, like I did the Rocky Horror Picture Show last weekend. And this time it's going to be about the history of frame drums and tambourines with my friend Glenn Velez. And I'll bring some Ukrainian music in with my friend Andrei Levchenko I filmed here. But it's just a little bit something different to reward our culture hounds. And we're stressed by always doing like such serious work. You know our friends online. You've been talking with Ken Harbaugh. I've got Frank Figluzzi. But having someone like Glenn Velez say, "Sure, I'll do an interview." I have a whole bunch of interesting folks that are not in this immediate orbit, and I'm gonna bring that up in, let's say, 3 hours. It'll be 1 o'clock my time. So, yeah, 6 o'clock East Coast time. That gives me time to go finish up the last part of that and finish food I purchased.
Cool. I just want to thank
Appreciate
everybody
you,
for
man.
the support. I mean, it's great. We're
Likewise.
doing really well, so I'm quite
Yeah.
happy with.
Please get a paid subscription to Sean's account. Support his journalism so we keep him focused on this work. And I know that I'm very glad for what you're doing. I'm liking to see that not just London Loves Business, but other outlets are turning to you to get that perspective. And amongst our friends, we push each other pretty well on how to bring the best for you guys. I like the responsibility in your tone when we talk about it, about what we do for the people that are watching.
Yeah, it's easier. I kind of like it. It's better than asking for money for our legal campaign and everything we do for veterans. And we can give something back to you. Then it's far better you pay 5, 8, whatever dollars per month, and we can give you insights and footage and interviews, and you're helping us to keep going. So and keep
When you're paid
supporting.
subscribers, I feel obligated. If you're free subscribers, I feel morally
Get you
obligated.
up every morning, doesn't it? It gets you like, you think, what shall I do today
It's
for
my
the
job. It's my
subscribers?
job. I just have
What
a
shall I do?
different. I have a different board of directors than one of the corporate jobs that would say, this is the thing. Corporate jobs in news are very, very difficult right now for people who really like journalism. That's a
Mm.
fact. And that's why I talk to people who, like Brian Karam and others, who are high level, White House correspondents and people with season, but they all are on here now because they know what's wrong with the industry. The news
Yeah,
industry has been
absolutely.
corrupted.
They asked me
The
about
answer
that,
to it is
actually.
for us to work with you guys. So,
They
go
asked
ahead.
me, said, what did I put down the success of my Substack? And considering I got 60,000 on X and I've only got 3,000 something on Substack,
Yeah.
they were interested in that. And I said, because I think generally people want to buy into somebody that they can trust on the front and close to the front line, the source.
Yeah.
And I think that generally, when I talk to people like the Times, they said it's something mainstream media misses because you've stopped
Yeah.
bringing people over here, stopped interviewing people here that have been living here for a long time. You come with a story before you've even got here
Precisely.
that's probably not even going to be relevant unless you get a bit of, something extra to go with it. So I said, no, I mean, I think people generally want to know what it's like to live in a war zone 2 hours from the front line with a cat, a family, go shopping, everyday life in the park, getting
Yeah,
bombed as
exactly.
well.
Exactly.
I think people want to know about that.
Well, I appreciate you being here, brother. And to everyone who's been
And you,
joining
mate.
in with us tonight, thank you so much for your support for Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam slava.
І пиздець Російської Федерації.